good. Oh, sorry, Tony. It's very good to see familiar names and faces after our summer hiatus. And it's also good to see several new faces and names. So I want to welcome everybody to our Lunch and Learn today. And having said that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see that picture? Cool. Okay. I want to remind everybody that the session is being videotaped. So if you can mute your microphones when you're not speaking, that would be great. And also want to remind you that if you would prefer to submit questions and comments during our dialogue portion via chat, you're welcome to do that. And either I will read them or Esmeralda, who's the technical co-host on this, will read them for you. Many people have a traditional image of a bishop in their head. They have an idea of what he does, what he wears, what he sits on. In the Diocese of Davenport, through the Catholic Messenger, we're very fortunate that we get to see our bishop living out his faith in response to the call for social justice. So, let's see. So we may see him at a meal site with someone who is living in a marginalized life. We may see him praying at an ICE check-in with an undocumented immigrant. We've seen him blessing plants that were then planted to grow food to support immigrant families. And we've also seen him in India with children who were being served by Catholic charities. But today, Bishop Thomas Zinkula is here to speak with us and to share some of his perspectives and experiences of going out to the peripheries in the quest for social justice. So with that, Bishop, I will turn it over to you.
All right, so thank you very much, Amy. And let's start with a prayer. This is a prayer from Laudato Si, Pope Francis. So let's begin in the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor in the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of everything, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So it's good to be with you all. I'm going to just kind of do a walk down memory lane. So this Lunch and Learn session gave me an opportunity to kind of just reflect on sort of where I've been, the journey I've taken over the years with social justice, being a part of different avenues of that. And so this is not meant to be look at me and everything I've done, everything I've been involved in. It's not that at all. Basically we bloom where we're planted. So I've been different places and along the way, and there's been different opportunities to serve others and to be involved in social justice activities. And so I've taken advantage of some of those opportunities. So this is my life, but I'm going to try to make it relevant to your lives as well. And we all need to look around and see what's going on, around us, and reflect on the needs that are out there, and consider the interests that we have. We can't all do everything, we have to pick and choose, but what are the gifts I have to share? What's something that really moves my heart and causes me to want to make a difference. So I'm going to start with my days in the seminary and take it through to now. So I was in the seminary in Washington, D.C. I attended classes at the Catholic University of America. And so I'm 28, I was practicing law, and I'm getting this new thing. And one of the things we had to do the first year in the seminary was to spend like a half a day a week doing something with serving the poor. In Washington, D.C., you have 1,000 different opportunities to do that, of course. So okay, here's me coming from Iowa, my background, and here I'm in the big city. So what I chose to do that first year was to work at this place called Gift of Peace. It was just up and running, getting going. And so I was a part of that, the very beginning of that. And it was a place run by the Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa's order, for a place for people to come and die, basically. And that time period was mostly Black men, mostly for the most part, gay, dying of AIDS, right? That was that era in the 80s. So I hadn't had that much experience with people of color at that point in my life, or people were more in the closet back in those days, in terms of their sexual orientation, and age was this new thing. And so that was a scary thing. So I chose that intentionally because I needed to get out of my comfort zone. And so I chose that periphery to go to use Pope Francis language. And I did what he says, encountered people that were different from me, dialogued with them, listened to them, and then I accompanied them, accompanying the other, right? So I recognized I had implicit biases and prejudices, and just like anybody, somebody the stranger, we can easily demonize them. And so, the first semester was basically getting that place ready to take in people, residents, and then the second semester it was a very intimate kind of ministry, obviously, when you're tending to people who are dying. So that was good for me. And honestly, part of it was too, I wanted to check out the Missionaries of Charity, just because, what are these guys all about? And Mother Teresa, I actually met Mother Teresa. She came for this. We had a dedication. There was a mass connected with that. So it was kind of cool to do that. So what are, how do each of you too, and me continuing, how do we need to go get outside our comfort zones and interact with people who are different from us? That's a huge thing, that very important thing that we need to do. And we can do that in the different activities that we get involved in the area of social justice. So that was one thing I did there. Another thing in seminary that some of us got involved in, we started this thing on Fridays after lunch. We would make sandwiches and put together some, apples and food, whatever, and take it downtown to the inner city in DC and to the poor. And so after a while, you kind of know where they hang out, and people were homeless, and so that was a good for me to interact with that population. That was the first time really that I sort of interacted with folks, and get to know each other over time and whatever. So I've continued with that over the years. Catholic worker houses here and there, like DC, and then Waterloo when I was there for a summer in my last year of seminary, and Dubuque, and now here in Iowa City. So I've taken youth there to Catholic worker houses and other places, like in Dubuque. There's this Dubuque rescue mission for folks, men who are homeless and hungry. Seminarians, we've always had, when I was a rector of a seminary, there's always some of them were involved in that kind of ministry. And so there's opportunities like that in every community. Here in town, there's McAnthony Windows, they have meals and food pantry. Cathedral has a food pantry and clothing, and Humility Housing and Services, Cafe on Vine. People can volunteer there, donate food and clothing, whatever that people want to do in those areas. Sometimes I just go down, and like I used to do this in Dubuque too, to the rescue mission, or here in Cafe on Vine before COVID. I just go down and just hang out with people and sit with them, and it helps to be a cleric. It kind of gives you somewhat of an in in terms of the conversation. But that's something that some people might feel called to be engaged in. Another thing in DC, one time there was, in the winter, there's the metro there, the subway, and there's stations where the homeless were kind of hunkering down at night, because it was protected area, certain settings where it was protected, and then they were, probably it was a little bit messy, afterwards, and so they were being removed from there, and so there's a protest. I can't remember who was organizing that exactly, but so I went down for it. Some other seminarians went down for it and participated in that. Martin Sheen was there, the actor. He was kind of, and so basically, okay, if this isn't a good place, then what are there other places where there's not other, they need a place to go. So that was something that I was involved in. I've been involved in protests, peaceful protests, prayerful protests outside Planned Parenthood clinics in Dubuque and Iowa City. So that's another thing. This isn't for everybody, but protests, marches, sometimes people are called to that, and we should all maybe consider that. Most recently, George Floyd, that whole thing with racism. I missed an opportunity. I pick and choose. I'm careful about those kinds of things. I don't want to get myself into something that I wish I wouldn't have. And you can't totally, control what's going to happen at something like that. But there was one at Vanderveer Park next door, and I didn't hear about it until shortly afterwards. I would have gone to that, but I missed out on that. So that's something to consider for social justice activities. When I was in the seminary one spring, the founder of Covenant House in New York City, some of you maybe have heard of Covenant House. It's a place for runaway kids, for street kids. And so this founder came and gave a talk and at Catholic U and one evening, and it moved me. So well, maybe I wanted to volunteer there. How do you do that exactly? But I made an argument to the Diocese, to Dubuque, that CPE, I didn't have to do clinical pastoral education, that piece of it where you work in hospitals, and there's this thing because I did that during the school year, that was part of the program at Catholic U. So I figured I had a free summer. So I asked if I could volunteer at Covenant House. They agreed to that. I had to find housing and everything and get that all and apply and get accepted. So I was able to find a place to live with some Capuchins over by like Penn Station and that area, which was within walking distance, and it was really cheap. It was great. It was just perfect for me. And I'd take a shift every day at Covenant House, and I was assigned to a floor, and we would work with them to help return them home, ideally, if that was possible, or get a GED if they didn't have that done yet, or get a job, or work on an addiction, get them into a long-term program, because it was a crisis center. I mean, there were a couple of policemen outside the doors, because either they were selling their bodies or they were selling drugs for, so working with a pimp or a drug dealer to survive on the streets. So they wanted them back, so it was kind of an interesting place. So there's lots of stuff to focus on there. And so some people maybe are called to work with youth, growing up in challenging situations. There's opportunities out there for that here in town, there's Project Renewal. Amy volunteers there. Maybe it's being a mentor in a school, even just giving donations. That's a huge thing. These places need money to operate. Then, so now I'm out of seminary. I'm in parish ministry as a parochial vicar and then eventually pastor. I've gone on a lot of service trips over the years. Appalachia, when I was in some rural parishes. And why did we do this? Well, a sister that had grown up, a religious sister, Franciscan from Dubuque, she'd grown up in that area, so we knew her, and she was working in Appalachia. So let's go there. And so I brought, some groups of youth there, and adults as well. And then, another assignment, Habitat for Humanity. Let's go do that. And we went to Kansas City a couple of times. Katrina. So I took a group down to New Orleans to fix up homes during that tragedy. Now there's Ida, but so that's a great thing to do, to work like that. That pulls youth into the church more, or anybody, and it's really important in those situations to bring prayer into that, and reflection, like in the evenings. That's really important to connect service to faith, hope, and charity. So like faith, God has given me gifts that I can share with others, to talk about that, identify those gifts, and recognize how you're using them in this situation. Hope, when I share my gifts with others, the world can be better. I'm helping these people out, whatever you're doing. And then charity, that's the service, loving others by serving them. So yeah, so service trips, that could be a parish, it could be a school, it could, those are definitely and it can evangelize young people. So I was in parish ministry for a while, and then I went to Ottawa to study canon law, and I was there for a couple of years. And while I was there, I wanted to do something besides just going to school. I could have lived in a parish and did ministry in a parish, but I decided I wanted to do something different. So I was looking around for things to do, and I checked out different places, and there's this place there called Uville Center. It's founded by a religious sister, and it's they basically were serving young single mothers. So it's like, with abortion, people are women are less likely to consider that and follow through on that if we're supporting them along the way. So there's lots of different ways that we can support them, to have a child, and so they were providing young women opportunities for to complete their education, and learning how to be a mother, and all this stuff they were doing. So they were looking to do something for young single fathers, to start a program. So, okay. So I kind of hooked up with, there's this young guy, it was a teacher and coach, and so he and I what we did was, on Friday nights, we had a gym that was available, and we played basketball and other things. So, guys, that's kind of, this competitive thing that was attractive. Then we had pizza afterwards. Then we talked while we ate pizza about them wanting to be fathers, to their children. Mostly their children were living with their mothers, but they wanted to be involved in their children's lives. So that was, when I was leaving after 2 years, they were going to they're going to hire a full-time person to take that thing on and move it, because it was very, minimal, just that one evening, and they were going to move it forward. So there's opportunities for that, to work with young mothers, Women's Choice Center here, Tri-State Pregnancy Center, Birthright is, they closed up shop, but there's other places as Birthright. So that's something that somebody might be called to do. I spoke earlier about Catholic worker houses, being involved with that ministry over the years. So there's the food and the housing and all that, but in Iowa City, they're really big into advocacy as well. So that's another thing, contacting legislators and congressmen and women, in this case, focusing on immigration. So yeah, so I've been a part of that, accompanying folks to ICE hearings in Cedar Rapids. And this was all Catholic worker kind of setting this stuff up and working with Kent and our social action office. But recently, a Zoom meeting with Representative Miller Meeks regarding immigration issues, and more recently, conference call with Senator Ernst regarding legalization and a path to citizenship for Dreamers and longtime residents with temporary protected status, seasonal agricultural workers, just kind of advocating. And so there's opportunities to do that. It's easy, actually. Like the Iowa Catholic Conference makes it very easy to sign. You can just sign up for alerts with regard to pending legislation over all kinds of things that concern us as Catholics. And here's how you contact your state legislators and your U.S. Congress people. Just click on this thing, and it's really easy to do. And another opportunity that is provided for folks in our diocese is with regard to Catholic Relief Services. We have a chapter now in the diocese, and there's also a student chapter at the Newman Center in Iowa City, and they do advocacy for things that they're involved in. So so now and I've been I can't be everywhere and do everything, but when people invite me, sometimes I'm able to be at when there's a cement plant, the Mount Pleasant cement plant ice raid a while back. We had a prayer service a couple of days later on a Sunday, and then the 1-year anniversary of Mass. And there's that picture of the blessing of the seeds and plants, in Mount Pleasant. And so, Mike Linenbrink was the one who was helping to spearhead that whole thing. And he's studying to be a deacon, and he saw a need there. I heard about it, and he jumped in. And we all can do that. We all can be a part of those kinds of things. And so if there's a need somewhere and there's an interest, and putting those two together. Another thing that I've been involved in for quite a few years now is prison ministry. So it started when I was in Archdiocese of Dubuque, and so I was Episcopal vicar, and I didn't have a regular weekend assignment, and then so there's that, and then I became director of the seminary. Same thing. So I started going to Anamosa Penitentiary once a month to celebrate Mass on Sunday mornings, and it's kind of, obviously it's scary at first, and you're going through all these locked gates and things, and but eventually I've been there long enough. They knew me, I knew them. They would just, I didn't have to have a guard accompany me. I could just walk through this facility and then out into the courtyard and up these steps to this chapel, which is way easier. And so anyway, and then I continue that as a bishop. We have 4 correctional facilities in the diocese: Fort Madison penitentiary is maximum security, Newton Correctional Facility is medium, Mount Pleasant has a minimum security, place in Oakdale in Coralville is a kind of it's a unique kind of a place, and there's a lot of things going on there, but they kind of classify inmates and place them after they're, before they are sent to some other place. So there's a lot of people involved, a lot of deacons, but also lay people, in Fort Madison area, in Coralville, St. Thomas More, Solon, Newton, all these places. It's not for everybody, that's for sure, but it's very rewarding ministry. I found anyway. COVID has shut it down, for now, but so that's something to consider. There's also Laudato Si kinds of things. I mean, one thing that we've been doing here, I see Lonnie Ellis here, who's online with us, and he's helped us with this big time. But we've had some events associated. So the Laudato Si has to do with the environment, and we brought together some business people and other folks, and here in Davenport at St. Ambrose and in Iowa City just last week, and just talk about what some of them are doing with regard to in their businesses with regard to the environment and it's good business. I mean, it's, if you want to make money, that's the way to go. It's you don't have to sacrifice profits to be a good citizen in terms of the environment. So just a few other things that, so there was the census recently, and I don't know, so it was brought to my attention that maybe the church could help the turnout, especially with regard to people that are living on the fringes, on the margins. And so Loxie and Amy and Glenn all helped with that and made a difference. They worked with other people in the area, other groups, and the turnout was much higher here. So that's something that people can do if they care about those in the margin, so that they can get, there's money for their more money for them for their services, because when it's based on the population. Land trusts, we're kind of doing something with that now here in Davenport, part of a larger group. So in terms of in the area of affordable housing, there's opportunities to do things in that area. Community wealth building was just something maybe this week, I think. Yeah. Expanding opportunities for historically disenfranchised residents to access income, capital, and wealth. Huge need. So there's things happening with that right now in the Quad Cities. Juvenile justice. I'm not sure exactly where things are at here, but in Dubuque, there's a drug court, and there's, a role for mentors, circles of support and accountability. We usually had, when I was a rector of the seminary, there was like one or two guys that were mentors for some young guy that's part of involved in drug court. Again, it's not for everybody, but if you're called to that ministry, it's really rewarding and really, it's not always successful, but it's a lot of times it is. So just kind of starting to wrap things up. I'm kind of talking about corporal works of mercy, Matthew 25 kinds of things, so a couple of things I haven't touched on. I mean, I've hit pretty much all those things so far, but a couple of things I haven't, and some of these things, covenant house, and it's kind of glitzy kinds of things, whatever. But I'm talking, there's just basic things that everybody can do that it's just as important as all these things that I mentioned, like visiting the sick and the elderly and the dying in hospitals. Anybody can do that, in long-term care facilities, people who are homebound, people who are in hospice. Just, once in a while, just go someplace and who's not getting visited, who's not, so then, go visit that person. When I was a pastor of a parish, well, actually, it was one parish that became pastor of 3 parishes in Dubuque that eventually merged. But it was a lot of older people. We had 100 funerals a year on average. So there's lots of, working, ministering to people who are sick and, and in care centers and things and dying. And so we put together a program. We had a deacon who was kind of parish associate, pastoral associate. And I couldn't get around to all these people, as much as I'd like to. So we kind of put this thing together and invited people to participate in it. And you can do this in your parishes, if you don't just say, hey, pastor, do this, but say you'll help organize it. We kind of put this thing out there and people could sign up for it. And we lined them up with people, with different folks. And sometimes they brought communion and, that was part of it, but it wouldn't have to be. And some of them would bring their kids. That was, this thing that they did with their kids or whatever. They were just lined up with however many they wanted, 1, 2, 3 people. And it was really good, to have that connection with the parish and to get to know each other. It's good for both sides of it. And so We in town here, there's this Call Home group, Catholic Service Board, that raises money for Call Home, and they also do more than just that. They help the ministry there at Call Home. So there's things like that going on out there. Another thing is, corporal work of mercy is to bury the dead. All right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of funerals where there aren't that many people there for whatever reason. There's just not that many. So people just attending funerals, and when maybe it's going to be that situation, and supporting the few folks who are there just by your presence, and praying that those people home to God, or assisting with funeral luncheons, or starting a grief support group in a parish. There's just all kinds of things we can do if we kind of are creative and we think about these kinds of things. So a couple miscellaneous things, and then I'll be quiet. We can have a conversation. One thing that I've done for like decades now is socially responsible investing. That's been very important to me, not to just invest my money anywhere. So, back in the day, maybe I took a little bit of a hit on that. The returns weren't as good, but nowadays, you can do as well or better than just regular investments, So, and there's Catholic groups out there like Aquinas and Ave Maria. There's funds that in our diocese, we actually, the Christian Brothers has this group, and we invest our money through them. And another thing is, and again, just basic stuff like a simple, sustainable living. So try to free ourselves from attachments and from consumerism. So I mean, I haven't had a television since I went to seminary. I don't know. I just got out of the habit of having TVs. There's always one in a common room. It's not like I never watch television, or in a rectory, maybe somewhere there'd be a common TV, and maybe I'd watch the news or watch whatever I want to watch. But I don't have a TV in my apartment. I don't miss it at all. And I know there's a lot of good things out there that I do miss, but I have a single bed, and it's a little bit extra in length because I'm taller, but that keeps. I don't know. So who cares? Well, it just keeps things simple for me. It changes my mindset in terms of just how I approach life. I have a 10-year-old car. It's 200,000 miles on it. I hardly ever buy clothes. I hate shopping. Obviously, I have to get some sometimes, but I grew up on a farm. I feel a little bit guilty about this, but I never buy meat. I get plenty of meat when I have plenty of meals out and about here and there. So in my apartment, I have a plant-based diet, and that's for sustainability purposes. So recycling and all those kinds of things. There's just so many things we can do in that area. So these are just it's just like my life, my walk down memory lane, and it's like, for what it's worth. But as I said at the beginning, my purpose is just to spark your imagination, get the wheels turning in your hearts and heads, and think about, like what are the needs around you? What are the things that you're seeing that where there's, people that are on the margins, on the peripheries, and what are your interests? What are your gifts? What is God calling you to do? I mean, you guys are all, doing stuff already. You probably wouldn't be on this call, but it's a kind of an ongoing thing. And how can we get our parishes more active in schools and these kinds of things that I've been talking about. So I'll shut up now, and Amy can take it from here.
Thanks, Bishop. I did have a question come in. With your legal background, has this been a benefit when you've been in meetings with ICE?
Yeah, I mean, right. So having a law background is helpful just with anything. I mean, you learn how to analyze situations and and argue, and have come up with good arguments and things. With ICE, I'm not intimidated by that, having been around the law and the legal system. I'm more kind of, I think I'm more comfortable with that language, the language that, the legal language, and it's not like this huge help, but it doesn't hurt.
Great, thanks. And then also a comment that if there is any parish interested in starting a grief support program, Grief Share is an excellent program that provides good resources and utilizes a video and a workbook.
And I'm sure Marianne Agnoli, if somebody was interested too, she would be happy to work with people. She's Director of Family Life Office here.
Correct. Yep. Other questions out there that? And I've got 3 screens of people, so I apologize if I don't get to somebody right away. Clara, you had something that you wanted to say? And you're on mute right now. Let's see. Still muted, Clara. I'm not sure. Clara, we're unable to hear you. Can you unmute your microphone? Okay. Okay, I'll tell you what, we'll come back to you. Is there anyone else who had a question for Bishop? And again, I'm trying to look around. Bishop, I actually wanted to ask, how do you feel that we're doing as a church in exposing our deacons and our priests as they're going through the process of becoming deacons and priests? How do you feel we're doing exposing them to Catholic social teaching?
For sure, they're getting, I mean, I know the deacons are exposed to that, and then they're actually doing, they have to have, what do you call it, Kent, that your ministry that you have to do on the side?
Field experiences.
Field experience, right. So they're getting the the doctrine and the teachings, as well as the actually hands-on experience, for sure. And I'm sure that's the way in seminaries as well. They're definitely getting that sort of a thing these days.
Okay, Claire, I saw that you had your
yes. Right. First of all, I want to thank the bishop for that very illustrative recitation of works. And I would like to shift the focus perhaps a little bit from, and maybe looking at this directionally. I think we have put a lot of focus on ground up experiences. I'd also like to ask us to expand our vision to top down, so that as I was listening, I think people here have an experience of having an educational system behind them and having some middle class, whether it's lower or higher middle class, factors supporting their abilities. And so I've recently helped form and join a group called Humans for Racial Justice in West Branch. And we started out by visiting with law enforcement chiefs and sheriffs, asking them for the data about what's going on in their county. And it was very illustrative because it shows that, at least in this rural county, Cedar, the medical needs of the poor are not being taken care of. Most of the calls for assistance from the police do not involve criminal activity. But while we might want to visit prisoners, we might also want to visit judges and encourage judges to visit state penitentiary places. They are routinely putting people into facilities which they have never visited. We might want to look at visiting funeral directors and asking them, how do they bury the poor? How does that occur? What kind of services are provided for when people die when they're poor? If we are more homebound, we might want to construct reading lists on social justice issues for our parish newsletters. We might want to look at affordable housing in our community, looking at the city budget, seeing what kinds of money you put into that. We might want to meet with realtors and asking them if they are directly or indirectly inhibiting the location of working class people. Excuse me. We might not only want to meet with candidates, but we might want to meet with CEOs or managers. We might want to look at the inside of a packing house plant, but also spend some time with the manager of that packing house plant and see how the wage rates are determined in various parts of the community. And last but not least, on farmland practices, we might want to visit the recorder's office in our counties and see who were the dominant, and look at plat books and see who were the dominant landowners in Iowa, and of those agricultural lands to visit and look. Do they have cover crops? Are there, we might want to visit, if you haven't visited already, a large feedlot operation for pigs and those large confinement units, and where do they dispose of their waste, and to talk to the corporate boards of those. In other words, we have a degree of education and a degree of middle class attributes, which we can talk to the powers that be. We can talk from the top down to try to create structural reforms. And I would urge that. It's a good, reminds me of the old Dorothy Day quote. When I fed the, or I forget, I don't think it was Dorothy Day, excuse me, but when I fed the poor, they called me a Christian. When I asked why they were poor, they called me a communist. I think we need to ask why.
Points there. Very good. That, as Bishop said, there are definitely needs out there, plenty of needs, and we need plenty of people to take an interest in those needs. And as Monsignor Mottet always stressed, walking with both feet, both the charity and the justice side. So you make a very good point. Bishop, well, actually, Lonnie, you said you'd like to say something.
Sure, yeah, and I'm Lonnie Ellis. I'm in Washington, D.C., and Bishop, I work with a lot of different bishops, and you're one of my favorites, though. I'm curious about faith and labor connections. One of our shared friends, Michael Sean Winters, and I have been working on this a little bit, and there's a Center for Worker Justice that I'm sure you're quite familiar with, but do you feel like priests are listening to people in the pews about, obviously, sometimes we don't know the immigration status of people we're working with, but even like if people are getting, exploited all in the workplace, kind of along those lines, especially if they are undocumented. Do you feel like there's much going on with the diocese and the priests and other Catholics with that issue? Thanks.
Yeah, Lonnie, I would think, I'm guessing your average priest or parishioner leader isn't conversant with that whole thing in terms of even recognizing that issue, much less looking into it and finding out what's going on. I that's not something that your average person probably would pick up along the way. So I think there need to be some education on that and some intentional kind of work on that to just bring it, like I was talking about, about law and everything. One thing that that they drilled into you in the first year is identifying the issue. It's really important to identify what are the issues out there in this situation, because you're not going to get anywhere until you can put something on the table. So I think like identifying that issue is, I think even that first basic step we haven't really taken. at least in this diocese, probably most dioceses. So much less, so see, judge, and act. So to see it and then to judge and then act, we could definitely do some work on that in that area. Kent, do you have anything you want to say about that?
I would just say that as Lonnie referenced, the Center for Worker Justice of Eastern Iowa, as a CCHD funded group, provides the opportunities to be supportive of workers that may be being taken advantage of. The fact that it's a CCHD funded group means that we have to vet that group in order to know that the work that they're doing is consistent with church teaching, and then avail both the laity as well as members of the clergy to understand the extent to which they're trying to help workers that may be the victims of wage theft or unsafe working conditions. So ultimately, we've got those types of experiences and means of supporting. It's a matter of promoting it. We have a CCHD intern with us this fall, and part of her responsibility will be to shed light on the campaign and the collection and the way that those funded groups are consistent with that responsibility to workers already in the diocese. So yeah, we're very fortunate to have had CCHD funded groups in the diocese for decades. So,
and Kent, did Dale work with that part a little bit?
Yes, a seminarian this summer was exposed to a CCHD funded group, and his conversation talked about it being a profound experience. And so that's where it's not just a matter of the laity, but as Bishop described his own time in seminary, we're doing so likewise for seminarians in these days as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mary McHugh, I think you have your hand up, or?
Yeah, I did. This is sort of at a different level, but the last week's Messenger had a great account of workshops and things that the Bread for the World is doing. And I'm wondering if any parishes are doing any of that, or it's a lot about what individuals can do in their homes and in their other activities for the environment. And I mean, that's a big thing that the Pope is pushing. How do you get parishes to do some of the things that are there already?
I mean, in terms of Bread for the World, that's one particular group. There's lots of groups that are like that. And I think there's a lot of parishes actually doing something. It's not like they're doing nothing in terms of feeding people who are hungry and one way or another.
I'm not talking about feeding people. I'm talking about environmental kinds of things. They have a workshop on, and how what you can do at home in simplicity and just taking care of the earth, really. And I don't hear very much of that in our parish. I don't know if that's just our parish, but
yeah. You know what I used to say about when people would bring those to me as a pastor and even as a bishop now, do this, do that. I'm like,
no, I'm not.
Help me. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to do this and it's a good idea, and I have a zillion things, but they want to take the lead on it and work with me on it, that goes a long, long ways, So don't be afraid to I don't know, lovingly and gently challenge the leadership in the parish to, in a particular thing, but don't just say, do this, but
I never.
yeah. Jump on. No, I'm challenging you lovingly and gently. No, no, seriously, that because it's we're all really busy and everything, and to say, hey, this is a good thing, and I want to help with this. And
I don't know why I said that. I know what to do.
I do think, Mary, are you talking specifically about supporting Bread for the World's efforts to end hunger, or are you talking about more about living sustainably?
That's what I'm talking about. It was in the paper, in your diocesan paper last Sunday.
So Barb or Lindsay, did you I wasn't sure which of you wrote the article, but whichever of you might have, did you have any contact with any parishes who were bringing in workshops, or?
I would have done that, but I'm sorry, I've just had so many things swirling in my mind. I didn't know if you're talking about the racial gap, or the racial, Bread for World was also working on that. Amy, help me with the name of that, the racial.
Racial wealth gap simulation?
Yeah,
I don't
maybe
know
that
if
was it.
I don't know if that's it or if it's sustainability.
It was sustainability.
Okay,
The
sustainability,
workshop, or something they're offering to the parishes, I guess. But
right.
when you do that, do all the parishes get something?
Speaking from my experience, because I basically hosted the racial wealth gap simulation last week, week before. And what I did was I opened it up to the diocese and said anybody, because we were able to do it via Zoom. I don't necessarily think it's the best way to do it, but it was a way to offer it to a lot of people in parishes who may not have had that opportunity. And I still feel like from the feedback we got that it was a meaningful experience for people, and they did feel they learned and they felt connected to the issue. So I would say, if you're not able to get something going at your local parish, reach out to the social action office. We may know of other parishes who have involvement, or we may be able to facilitate something that would involve multiple parishes.
Thank you.
I can't tell if Molly's hand is up because she really wants to ask Bishop a question or if she's just waving.
He's just waving.
There's a question for Bishop.
Okay.
What do you see as the greatest challenges facing the parishes today?
Just in general, or with regard to social justice, or?
That's how the question is addressed, maybe in general.
Oh, well, I mean, what I've kind of been saying is the thing that I'm most focused on now, and as long as I'm a bishop, is going to be evangelization. I mean, we have to bring the faith to folks. We have to, attract people to what we have to offer. And so, and like I was saying before, service is a way to do that. It's a way to get the attention of young people, and to do some reflection around that, with them in prayer. And that's a huge way to draw people into the church, or more deeply into the church. So, I mean, if we won't have churches if we don't have people, right? So we need to, we need to share the faith with folks. And so, and one way to do that is to bring people into the church is through social justice. It's just, people want to help. I think, we all want to help folks that are suffering one way or another, or struggling. And so it's just part of who we are. But then that's part of who Jesus is too. That's what our faith is all about. Matthew 25, that's what's going to be we're going to be judged on that. And to see Jesus in our brothers and sisters who are struggling, that's really what it's all about. So I think, so my thing is evangelization, but that touches everything. And this can certainly help with that, in terms of service, social justice efforts.
I had another question in the chat, Bishop. It said you talked about lots of concrete experiences of service that you had over the years. Were there any individuals or communities who have served as models of social justice to you?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, all the groups I talked about. Another group that's, there's been, unfortunately scarred a little bit, but L'Arche community was started by Jean Vanier, and so he's kind of fell from grace, but that doesn't take away from their ministry. I really admire kind of what they're doing, serving people who are, intellectually disabled or whatever, and living, in community. And I marvel at that. I don't know that if I could do that. So that's something I would hold up as that it's a great witness to me in terms of, being proud of being a Christian, a Catholic Christian, and what the church is doing out there. So that's one group. I mean, Catholic worker, they're a little bit edgy sometimes, and we have conversations sometimes. Okay, you guys, whatever. Let's be careful. But they're doing great things, and they're a witness to me as well. What you're doing, Amy, with Project Renewal. Oh my gosh, just quietly behind the scenes. I know, you don't want to hear this kind of thing. Maybe I'm lifting you up, but that's a witness to me. Just, it's a really important ministry there. It's kind of tucked away. Maybe not lots of people know what's going on there, and then the role you play as a volunteer, the 3 volunteers here, Loxie and Amy and Glenn, we couldn't do what he does, and that department couldn't do what it does if it wasn't for you all. And you care deeply about the faith, you're passionate about social justice. Those are just a few. I could give a lot of examples, but those are some that come to mind.
One last question, I think, Bishop. We've got about 3 minutes remaining. What sort of social action initiatives are being considered to service and support farmers and landowners in agriculture?
So is Kent still on?
He had to leave to.
All right. So one thing that we're doing, because he's more conversant with this than I am, but Deacon Dan Freeman is working with Catholic Rural Life. So we're actually, it's kind of just getting kind of going, but there's stuff happening with, through that effort to help farmers. There's, when we know there's like mental health things for farmers that something that, that services that we've promoted in recent months, that comes to mind. With farmers, some of this Laudato Si kind of a thing, that's a lot of that's in that area as well, in terms of farming practices and taking care of the earth. So we could kind of go in that direction with that. There's something that we're looking at, I can't think of what this is called. There's a group that hooks up farmers from the US with farmers in Africa. And so there's a diocese in Kansas has been doing something with that. And so now we've been in conversation with them where, there's a farmer and they're here that we identify and it's in touch with a particular farmer. And a lot of times they're the religious organizations that are able to buy the land. And so you're maybe working with a priest or sister or somebody in Africa, just sharing your what you know and what you about farming, good best practices and things. So that's something that we're looking at in terms of helping Christian farmers, in Africa.
I'd also put a plug in for we have 3 Google groups. So we have email conversations. One is Parish Social Action. One is Social Action Advocacy. And then one is Voices for Rural Life. And we're always looking for members who have more experience than, like I help manage it, but I have 0 experience with agriculture. We try to post things, especially around mental health in that group, but we're always looking for other members to add and contribute to that group. So I want to be very respectful of everybody's time. It is 1 o'clock. Bishop, thank you so much for taking the time to share.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
And Bishop had mentioned evangelization. And I don't know if you knew this or not, Bishop, but you're prescient because our October 7th Lunch and Learn, our guest speaker is going to be Tony Schmadeke, who is Director of Evangelization for the Diocese. And he is going to talk about the intersection of evangelization and social action. So it'll be a great follow on to this one. So hope to see many of you there. You'll be getting the invites. And thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you all.
Thank you.
And